Alrighty, so this decision is about as interesting as insurance law gets, and oddly enough, it has nothing to do with the decision itself,
and only to do with the potential ramifications of the decision.
Viva Fry, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and for those of you who have been around my channel for long enough, you have seen my weekly live streams with Robert Barnes. You have seen Robert Barnes say, file petitions for cert to the Supreme Court, even if they have minimal chance of being heard. File lawsuits, even if you think a judge is going to toss it, because all it takes is one successful lawsuit to get the ball rolling. Courage is contagious, and sometimes all it takes is one courageous judge to set one precedent for other judges to realize it's not the end of the world if they make similar decisions. This question has come up more acutely in the context of the coronavirus pandemic, the government's response to the pandemic, some of the rules and decrees they have been issuing, the lockdown orders, the curfew orders, people saying these are not constitutional laws, yet if we go to court, the likelihood is that the courts are not going to intervene. And Robert Barnes has been saying from the beginning, do not despair, just keep knocking at the door, because one day the door is going to open, and when that door opens a crack, it can open a lot. By way of example, for those of you who have been following my Viva on the streets at night, I have been documenting in real time the Quebec curfew that has been imposed in addition to the lockdown, which shut down non-essential businesses as of December 25th, 2020, 10 months into the pandemic, but I digress. I have been documenting the Quebec curfew. I have been documenting Quebec's response to the pandemic. I have been documenting the lawsuits coming out of the United States. And wouldn't you know it, lo and behold, in Quebec in recent months, there have been 2, if not 3 lawsuits filed against the government to contest some of these measures. There have been lawsuits filed across the country and across the United States, from Michigan to California to New York. And wouldn't you know it, at first the courts were reluctant to intervene. They deferred to the better judgment of the government, but it seems that the courts are now getting a little more inclined to intervene. It seems the courts are getting a little more inclined to intervene and declare some of these draconian measures to be totally unconstitutional and totally unjustifiable, at least with respect to certain segments of society. And just this week in Quebec, in response to a lawsuit which challenged the constitutionality of the curfew measures imposed by our government, because get this, our government was imposing the curfew on homeless people. They were actually ticketing homeless people for not being at home during the curfew. And if you can go one step further in terms of the inconsistency, the government was also shutting down homeless shelters because of the coronavirus pandemic.
That doesn't make sense.
The government was shutting down homeless shelters while simultaneously ticketing homeless people for not being home after curfew. It actually resulted in a tragic situation where a homeless person named Raphael Andre, who was kicked out of a homeless shelter that was closing at 9:30 at night because of the coronavirus pandemic, sought refuge in a porta potty and froze to death overnight. So a law firm known as the Mobile Legal Clinic that represents marginalized groups filed suit, and a judge said, yes, these curfew measures are unconstitutional, at least as relates to homeless people. They violate Quebec and charter rights, and therefore we are declaring this law unconstitutional and unenforceable as relates to homeless people. And with that precedent, once you declare a law unconstitutional, at least with respect to one group of people, it becomes easier for other judges to declare that same law unconstitutional as relates to other groups of people. In the courts from Michigan to New York to Quebec to California, we are starting to see something of a turning of the tide as relates to judgments coming out of the courts. And as far as I am concerned, the judgment that we're going to look at today continues along the same vein, but for one specific reason, I think it is going to be even more important as relates to actual policy change. The decision is Henderson Road Restaurant Systems, Inc., doing business as Hyde Park Grill et al., plaintiff versus Zurich American Insurance Company, defendant. Judge Dan Aaron Polster. Now, we are not going through this decision in the way I would ordinarily go through a decision. I think it's going to be totally tedious and boring. It really is only the questions of law coming out of this decision and the impact on policy that is going to be very important. From the earliest stages of this pandemic, when the government started shutting down businesses, it became an interesting legal question as to whether or not this shutting down of the businesses would become an insurable loss. Could these business owners who have seen their business literally shut down by government order overnight file insurance claims for business interruption, loss of enjoyment of property, whatever? Could they file insurance claims to recover some of their losses? The answer to that question is going to be, it depends on what your insurance policy says, but as a general rule of law, insurance policies tend to have exclusions, lots of exclusions, and those exclusions include things like pandemics, civil riots, microorganisms, disease, earthquakes, things that tend to affect a lot of people at the same time, whereas if insurance companies had to start issuing payouts to everyone at the same time, it would just basically bankrupt the insurance companies. But then the interesting question of law became, if it is not the pandemic itself that is forcing the shutdown or the business interruption, but rather the government's response to the pandemic, can it then become an insurable loss? There has been no consistent response from the courts, but this was effectively the question that was being asked in this particular lawsuit, and the judge in this lawsuit said, yes, it is an insurable loss because it is not the microorganism. It is not the pandemic itself that is causing the business interruption. It is the government measure forcing businesses to shut down. Just the briefest of summary of the facts of this decision. Plaintiffs: Henderson Road Restaurant Systems, Inc., doing business as Hyde Park Grill. Coventry Restaurant Systems, Inc., doing business as Hyde Park Chop House. And a bunch of other plaintiffs operated restaurants in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Indiana, and Florida. In the spring of 2020, state governments issued orders restricting the operations of restaurants in an effort to abate the spread of the coronavirus, COVID-19. In response to these orders, plaintiffs closed all but 4 of their Ohio restaurants on March 15, 2020. Those 4 Ohio restaurants continued to provide only carrying out dining until March 17, 2020, and then they closed. On March 24, 2020, plaintiffs submitted a claim to Zurich under commercial insurance policy number whatever for loss of business income caused by these state orders. Zurich denied coverage on April 27, 2020. The parties have identified the following portions of the policy as relevant to their dispute. The policy defines, quote, covered cause of a loss, end quote, as, quote, a fortuitous cause or event not otherwise excluded which actually occurs during this policy period, end quote. And then we have the exclusion of microorganisms. Now, I know Robert Barnes has his own eternal truths of life, and I have my own. One of which is you don't make friends with salad, and the other of which is insurance companies do not make money by paying out claims.
You don't win friends with salad.
You don't win friends with salad. You don't win friends with salad. You don't win friends with salad. You don't win friends with salad.
So when you are signing on to an insurance policy, more important than what the insurance policy covers is what is excluded from the insurance policy coverage. This commercial insurance policy excluded losses resulting from microorganisms, and there was also a debate over what the term loss of property meant. In this case, in order to avoid paying out the claim, the insurance company argued that loss of property meant physical loss of property and not loss of enjoyment of use of the property, and they also argued that the COVID-19 pandemic fit within the microorganism exclusion of coverage. There was also an aspect to this claim that the insured was claiming that the insurer's refusal to pay out the claim was motivated by bad faith. The judge summarily dismissed of that argument, but the judge gave reason to the insured on the 2 other arguments. The judge came to the conclusion that the business interruption, the loss, the claim here did not directly result from any microorganism, so it was not covered by an exclusion under the policy. Rather, the loss resulted from a government measure, not from the virus itself, and therefore it was not excluded from coverage under the policy. Moreover, the judge came to the conclusion that the loss of property did not need to be a physical loss of property, it could be just a loss of enjoyment of property for it to be covered under the policy. From what I understand, as is typically the case when the insurance company loses, this decision is going to appeal, but this is a very important precedent, not only from a jurisprudential point of view, but from a policy point of view. It is the depressing reality of politics and lobbying, but you want to know how you change government policy, you get very influential people with deep pockets with a lot of monetary sway to put pressure on the government to change those policies. And if judges across the country start ordering insurance companies to pay out under policies because they deem the losses to be not related to coronavirus itself, but as a result of the government measures, once you start getting ordering insurance companies to pay, it is only a matter of time before those insurance companies start putting a lot of pressure on the government to start reopening things. The minute these lockdown measures start costing big industries big bucks, you will start to see government moving because you will start seeing a lot of people lobbying the government to open things up. The government may pretend to listen to the little people, but the reality is they take their orders from the big people with the deep pockets and the monetary influence, and once the insurance industry says to the government, you better start opening things up because if we have to start paying these claims out left, right, and center, we are going to go bankrupt, the government will start to move. And even if this is by no means a jurisprudential consensus, having one brave judge in Ohio set the wheels in motion, set that little domino that pushes over a bigger domino that pushes over a bigger domino yet until it can push over a door, that is how you get the ball rolling. It may not be the precedent, but it is definitely a precedent that certainly creates some exposure for insurance companies who may now in turn start putting some pressure on the government to perhaps pull back some of their draconian knee-jerk responses to the coronavirus pandemic. It is the depressing reality of politics. The government will listen to the citizenry complain until the citizens are blue in the face, but they will really start moving once they have pressure from powerful groups. Insurance groups are among those most powerful. We will see where this goes. I will do a follow-up as soon as there is anything to follow up on, but at the very least, I am sensing, if not a change in the direction of the pendulum, at least a decrease of the force in which it is swinging to the extreme. And with that said, if you like my videos and you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below because it feeds the algorithm.
You can do it. Be missing. mall.
If you want to support the channel, all of these support links are in the pinned comment. We've got PayPal, Patreon, subscribe to our YouTube membership. We've got merch, keep calm and vlog on. Robert Barnes and I do weekly live streams every Sunday at 7 o'clock. We also have a page on Locals. It is called vivabarneslaw.locals.com. I'm also on Rumble, where all of my YouTube content can be found. But more important than any of that, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well, and now you know your vlog. Peace out.
You don't win friends with salad.
You don't win friends with salad. You don't win friends with salad. You don't win friends with salad.
You don't win friends with salad. You don't win friends with salad. You don't win friends with salad. You don't win friends with salad.